interviewed just a little while ago Bernie Sanders' campaign manager, Jeff Weaver, who had some rather tough words for the Nevada State Democratic Party. Listen to what he told me.
We do not condone any kind of violence or threats. That's unacceptable. Bad language. That's unacceptable. But we are not going to allow the millions of people who supported Bernie Sanders to be sort of rolled over in places like Nevada by the way they handled that convention.
The Sanders campaign says that the Nevada State Party, the Democratic Party, prevented a fair and transparent process. Was it unfair?
Well, first, let me just reiterate that the Democratic National Committee remains neutral in this primary based on our rules. But when I heard what happened at the Nevada State Democratic Convention this weekend, I was deeply disturbed. Regardless of any campaign or candidate's frustration over process, there should never be a but when it comes to condemning violence and intimidation. Violence and intimidation are never acceptable under any circumstances, and what happened at that convention was unacceptable. I was not at the convention, and the Democratic National Committee didn't have anything to do with the way the meeting was run, but the bottom line is that we've had the same rules in place, that elected Barack Obama, and these rules were adopted for state parties all across the country in 2014. They were followed, and even if the Sanders supporters were frustrated, there is never, under any circumstance, a place for violence and intimidation to be resorted to in response.
Congresswoman, the Nevada State Democratic Party said, and I'm quoting now, that Sanders' campaign staff and supporters incited violence and chaos. Those are pretty strong words. Does the DNC believe the Sanders campaign, that staffers actually incited violence?
Well, like I said, I was not there, but I do know, because there was video and acknowledgement, that chairs were thrown at the stage, that violence was used, that the state party chair, Roberta Lang, who has worked in the trenches to elect Democrats for decades, has been threatened. Her children, her child has had implied threats where people have called and said they know where her child goes to school. This is unacceptable behavior, and the Sanders campaign and Senator Sanders himself should not only outright condemn that specific conduct, but they also need to take steps to prevent it and make sure that their supporters understand that the most important and correct way to respond to any frustration they have over process is to be civil and orderly, not respond with violence and intimidation. And that needs to be unequivocally condemned. And unfortunately, it has not been unequivocally condemned.
Have you reached out directly to Bernie Sanders to talk to him about your concerns?
I have not. We have communicated through our senior staff, and I sent a statement, and Senator Reid and others have spoken directly with Senator Sanders. I think it should be pretty clear to anybody that violence and intimidation is never acceptable under any circumstances, and it should be condemned, and there are no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Why not call him? Why not reach out? You're the leader of the Democratic Party. Why not make a phone call to Senator Sanders and tell him exactly what you just told us?
After I heard that Senator Reid that Leader Reid had had a conversation with Senator Sanders, and he publicly announced that he felt that Senator Sanders was going to respond appropriately and issue a statement, I was comfortable that one conversation was enough. Unfortunately, the senator's response was anything but acceptable. It certainly did not condemn his supporters for acting violently or engaging in intimidation tactics, and instead added more fuel to the fire. Like I said, you can be frustrated with the process, but in the United States of America, and especially in the Democratic Party, it is never appropriate to act in any way other than civilly and in an orderly fashion, and address process concerns in a civil way. It is never okay for violence and intimidation to be the response to that frustration. That's what happens with the Trump campaign. We can never resort to the tactics that they engage in.
Congresswoman, how are you going to make sure, given the anger out there, given the passion out there, that you can prevent this kind of chaos from developing at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia?
Well, I think that as a result of this happening this weekend, we will have conversations both at the staff level as well as my having conversations with the candidates so that we can make sure that both campaigns are focused on making sure that we can allow this process for the duration of the primary to play out in a civil and orderly way, and make sure that we don't do anything that is going to make it more challenging for us to unify behind our eventual nominee so we can elect a Democratic president. But it is incumbent upon all Democratic leaders to make sure that they lead, that they speak out against violence and intimidation, that those tactics be condemned, and that instructions be given and plans made to communicate with supporters who may not always be familiar with the way the democratic process works. Make sure they understand it and let them know what they can expect and what the expectations of each campaign is of their own supporters in terms of the way they act as the remaining delegate selection process